All right, welcome back to our class today. We're talking on chapter 9, the fifth commandment, thou shalt not kill. And just a quick review before we dive into that, because I think that this review question, I told you that this would be really important when I taught it, and I want to make sure that we come back to it because it's going to be a really important part of what we're talking about today. And it's all the way back from the first chapter. And the question, what makes a human's soul different from a dog's soul? What makes a human soul different from a dog's soul? That's a very important question, and because it has a lot to do with what we're talking about today. This is the Sistine Chapel, and this is the creation of Adam. God making Adam and talking about being made in His own image and likeness, being made in the image and likeness of God. Unlike all of the other things that were created, Adam was made in God's image and likeness. And so because of that, the answer to this question is, what makes a human soul different from a dog soul is that only human souls are made in the image and likeness of God. And because of that, we believe that everything then flows from this idea that we're all made in the image and likeness of God. The fact that we have dignity, the fact that we can't take our own lives, the fact that we have to treat each other with respect, the fact that we have rights, the fact that we have to be treated a particular way. And so because this is a hugely important thing for Catholic teaching, that's why it's on this is one of the main pieces in the Sistine Chapel that you see referenced all the time. This is a huge thing, and it's not always shared by every faith. And so it makes Catholic morality very unique, very important emphasis on this creation in the image and likeness of God. The reason that this is important is that the fifth commandment is not just about murder. This is a famous painting image of Cain just killing his brother Abel by an artist named Gustave Doré, but that doesn't matter. The image is, of course, of the first murder that takes place. But the fifth commandment doesn't just cover murder, although murder is covered because if we're made in the image and likeness of God, we can't kill each other. There's this divine spark that's in each person, and so because of that, I can't go and just kill them. But it's deeper than murder, and we're going to get into that today. And this is the gospel, and this is what Jesus even says, hey, it's the fifth commandment. It's not just murder. There's a lot more to it. Okay? Jesus says, you have heard that it was said to the men of old, you shall not kill, and whoever shall be liable to judgment. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother shall be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother shall be liable to the council, and whoever says you fool shall be liable to the hellfire. So even how we speak to other people, how we treat other people falls under this same fifth commandment. I can be angry towards another. I can murder someone's reputation. I can violate their dignity and take that away from them or not honor it in lots of different ways. And so we're going to talk about the different ways that this comes in. We talk about life, and we talk about two different ways two different ends of our life that we see in a particular way in our own culture today. We see life being attacked. We see the fifth commandment being violated. And the church has a lot to say about both ends, about how we treat life at both ends of our lives. The first that I want to talk about, we want to look at the beginning of our life, the way that we attack life in our culture today. It's not some 35-year-old Cain murdering some 35-year-old Abel, or however old they were. But so when we get on the ends, when we get to the beginning of life, and when we get to the end of life, it becomes more challenging, it becomes more fuzzy, it looks like, at least anyway, because, well, it's just a fetus, or the old person wants to die anyways, just pull the plug. And so we have to dive into this. This is really important, and I know that you get questions about this probably as well, a lot of these different teachings. The first way that we attack life, that we violate the fifth commandment so often in our country, is through the sin of abortion. And this is from Pope John Paul II in a letter that he wrote. Direct abortion always constitutes a grave moral disorder, since it is the deliberate killing of an innocent human being. Always. Always. It is, even in the case of incest, even in the case of rape, and that might sound really hard teaching, but what we know is, and what we believe, and what the church's wisdom has said through the years, is that having an abortion never healed anyone from any of those situations, even those terrible situations of incest and rape and these sorts of things. That what happens even in those extreme cases where a person is conceived, what we have found through the experience and testimony of people and their witness in their lives is that abortion didn't help me one bit overcome the pain that also came along with the rape or the incest, etc. What we find is in an abortion there's always two victims. There's the mother and there's the baby. And so we talk about abortion always and everywhere, no matter the circumstance, being wrong. And being a gravely wrong, being a mortal sin in that sense. It's an act that cuts us off. Even those who help get it. And so we talk about that in the Catechism. A Catholic who gets an abortion, who performs an abortion, so doctors or anybody like that, or formally cooperates in abortion. If you drive someone to get the abortion, if you help pay for the person to get an abortion, if you encourage someone over the phone or on Snapchat to get an abortion, you are formally cooperating in an abortion. And it says, this is very strong language, and the Church does not use this language very much. But it says that if you do that, if you get an abortion, you perform one, you formally cooperate in an abortion, you are automatically excommunicated from the sacramental life of the Church. You cannot receive communion, you cannot receive any of the sacraments until you have gone to the sacrament of confession and confessed that sin. Pope Francis was in the news this year saying that priests have a particular ability. Sometimes in some countries, the Church has actually said abortion has to be something that we send to Rome and actually ask for forgiveness through Rome, through this whole process that's set up where the priest writes an anonymous letter to Rome and Rome sends an anonymous letter back saying you may forgive that person of that particular sin, and it would take a while. Long ago in our country, in the United States and in a lot of other countries, we've been given as priests the ability to help to absolve anyone of any of those sins that we mention here. So if you participate in an abortion, you get one, you help someone, you cooperate in one, all you have to do is go to a priest and confess that sin, and that sin is forgiven, and you're back restored into the sacramental life of the Church. So the Church, anytime you see excommunication, we can think of that as like medieval ages, like, oh, everyone's bad and you're all going to hell and all that sort of thing. Anytime someone is excommunicated, it's done for the intention of helping them realize what they've done so that they will come to the sacrament and be restored. It's not meant to be no one is ever excommunicated with the hope that that's how the story will end. Excommunication is always done in order to help a person recognize that they need to come back. And so often, like if I can just keep coming up and receiving communion over and over and over again, then I never have any reason to, if I'm receiving Jesus in the Eucharist, then what's my impetus for coming back to the sacrament of reconciliation and confessing my sins? And so excommunication is always done as a healing thing, even though people will portray it as being angry and the Church is medieval and blah, blah, blah. Okay? Arguments for abortion. Just want to talk about some of these. Maybe you've heard them. There are many others that we have to spend our time refuting and so forth. But some people will say, in abortion, it's okay to take the pill. Like there's a pill. So what happens is the egg in the woman is fertilized by the sperm. And it takes oftentimes several days to travel still, even though the egg is fertilized and is now growing into a fetus and an embryo and all those sorts of things, and becoming... It's still moving through the woman's body for up to 7 days or so. And it doesn't implant on the mother's uterine wall for maybe a week or so. And so some people will say, well, you can take an over-the-counter pill or any, morning after pill, which will help assist in not allowing that fertilized egg, that child, that embryo, to implant on the mother's wall. It helps prevent that from happening, and thus the mother, the embryo, the child is passed through the normal cycle of the woman's body, etc. Okay? So some people will say, well, if this embryo hasn't implanted on the side of the mother's uterus yet, then it's okay to go ahead and kill that because the child has not implanted yet. But what we know is that as soon as the moment that a sperm and an egg, the sperm fertilizes the egg, the child is already forming. The cells start dividing instantly and start becoming very specific, and it becomes an embryo. And there's a unique genetic code right from the moment that the sperm fertilizes the egg. There's this growth that's continuing to go. And if you leave it alone, it becomes a child. It goes through if it would go through the normal process, it would become a child. So taking some pill to prevent the embryo, the fertilized egg, the embryo, the child, the fetus, from implanting on the uterine wall, to do that then is an abortion, and it's still wrong. Why would it be any better if it happened before the child implants on the mother's uterine wall or before? It doesn't matter. Whenever you kill it, as soon as you kill the egg that's been fertilized, you have killed a child. You have killed a new conceived soul that's there. We believe that at conception, that becomes a unique life. And again, we even see this in the biology. What we have there with the sperm and the egg, there's a unique set of DNA that's unique to that particular child. It's right from the moment of that conception. And so it wouldn't be okay to then say, well, I can kill it before implantation. What we see is people with abortion, they keep saying, well, if it doesn't look like a child, and that it's easier to do it if I can't see the child, I have to look under a microscope. Well, then it's okay to kill it, or, well, it doesn't quite look like a child yet, or its heart doesn't beat yet, or it doesn't have a brain yet. People just come up with all these different things. I was once listening to a science show on public radio, and the person was saying, well, when is it a child? And the scientist said, well, we're not exactly sure yet. No kidding, right? Of course you're not sure, because you either have to say that it's becoming a child from the moment of conception, or you have to make something up, like when it has 5 fully formed fingernails or something like that, and it's completely arbitrary. Who cares if it's implanted yet on the side of the mother's uterine wall or not yet? It has a unique genetic code, is its own child. It is a child from the moment of conception, right? That's when the miracle takes place. And so abortion, we say, it doesn't matter. If you take some pill to have the child not implant on the mother's uterine wall, that's an abortion too. Okay? But then people will come back and they'll say, but God causes abortions before implantation. This is this is just one of those arguments that's sort of crazy, right? People will say, well, what happens, and this is true, sometimes the egg is fertilized by a sperm, and that embryo begins to form, that child begins to form, and through natural biological things, the embryo does not implant on the mother's uterine wall and passes through her body. Now, that is different because that's happening naturally. It's the same thing with a miscarriage. Sometimes the embryo is fertilized and it's passing through the woman's body and implants on the mother's uterine wall, begins to grow as a child, but then as that growth takes place at 8 weeks along, or even sometimes much later than that, the woman can still lose the child through miscarriage. To say that miscarriage and abortion are the same thing, or to say that if the embryo doesn't implant on the mother's wall is the same thing as taking a pill to make that happen, I mean, what kind of that's not even logical, right? There's a difference. One is it's happening naturally, and it's happening through a process that is taking place because of biology and because of things that we don't even understand. Whatever, it's happened. That the embryo does not implant on the mother's uterine wall. It happens that there are miscarriages, but that's totally different than causing it to happen, right? I mean, we have to recognize that if we're grown-ups. I mean, if we're adults, we have to recognize the difference between those two things. It happening naturally, the process happening naturally, and causing it to happen. To say that a miscarriage is the same thing where a child is through, for some reason, and natural processes, the mother loses the child, to say that that's the same as a doctor going in with a scalpel and a suction thing and killing the child and sucking out the body parts, to say that that's the same thing is just, it's not, I can't even fathom that, right? People will say a lot of times too, you hear a big argument from viability is the name of that. So viability would be how, able to support itself. You would say that, well, the child can't live outside the womb yet, right? The child can't breathe on its own, or its heartbeat doesn't work, so we can kill it up to the time where the child can live outside the womb. But here's the crazy thing, is that a 2-year-old child is not viable either. If you leave a 2-year-old child or a 1-year-old child that's been born and alive for a year out in the world for a year, that 1-year-old child, it can't feed itself, and it would die within a matter of days, if not hours, if you left a 1-year-old alone. So saying that we can kill a child up to the point where it can survive outside the womb, well, what do you mean survive outside the womb? Do you mean like build and get water for itself and feed itself, well, then you're probably talking about, what, 15-year-old or a 12-year-old or something like that before you can feed yourself and find water and build shelter. I mean, this whole viability thing about whether or not it can live on its own outside the womb is crazy, because lots of children, most of the children that are under 5 years old can't live outside the womb for very long, right? So viability is just a bad argument for abortion. There are a lot of other arguments. We can get into them, but I don't want to spend all day on this. If you ever have any of them that you'd like to talk about, hey, I heard this, somebody asked me that, just send it to me. I'd be happy to talk to you about it and maybe give you some resources or things to look at. The one thing that I want to do really quickly is I want to look at a quick video about what goes on in the abortion industry, about how it's all really set up for profit. It's all really set up. Planned Parenthood is the #1 abortion provider in the country. How it was set up by a woman who said that she wanted to wipe out all of the African Americans and poor people in the world who were a burden on society, and all of the immigrants. That's why she set up Planned Parenthood and started the idea of passing out contraception and having abortion on demand for people. It's a shocking history that no one ever talks about. I want to watch this real quick video clip that looks at a little bit of the abortion industry. It's a trailer for a documentary that's coming out, or that's already out, but it does it in a nice short little window, talk about what's going on in our country today.
We had a whole plan that sold abortions, and it was called sex education. Break down their natural modesty, separate them from their parents and their values, and become the sex expert in their life, so they turn to us when we would give them a low-dose birth control pill they would get pregnant on, or a defective condom. Our goal was 3 to 5 abortions from every girl between the ages of 13 and 18.
Multitudes of people that have been hurt by abortion. It's just unfathomable.
That abortion is really, to me, the ultimate exploitation of women.
It is so shameful and secretive that many women don't tell anybody that they've had an abortion.
They won't say anything for 20, 30, 40, 55 years. They're so traumatized. Silence.
U.S. Senate report states, physicians, biologists, and other scientists agree that conception marks the beginning of the life of a human being, a being that is alive and is a member of the human species. There is an overwhelming agreement on this point in countless medical, biological, and scientific writings.
Planned Parenthood is expanding now. They're building gigantic abortion clinics in anticipation of socialized medicine.
There's a lot of money involved. We never would take personal checks. We always encourage the ladies to bring cash.
Why is that?
So, you don't have to report cash, friend.
When you're fighting for your life, you need to know what you're fighting for. And if what you're fighting for is life, how do you destroy a life in an effort to fight that fight? I'm fighting so hard to save myself that I'll kill someone else to get that.
I recognized I'd been involved in the death of 35,000 babies.
And the truth has really come out about what abortion does to women, let alone the unborn baby, our dead babies. It will be over.
Okay, hopefully that was helpful for you. I want to look at really quickly one of the things that you hear, and this is a real important thing for you as a high school student. You will hear a lot of terrible secular arguments, secular meaning not religious, right? Not religious, and ethicist is someone who says talks about what's right and wrong. And we have lots of different religious traditions, lots of different ways to talk about right and wrong and natural law and all these other different things, depending on your Jewish tradition or your Hindu tradition or your Muslim tradition. there's a lot of different schools of ethicists, and there's a lot of agreement, as we said, with the natural law. I mean, a lot of people all agree on what's right and wrong in a basic way. But there are a lot of terrible secular ethicists that are out there talking about what's right and wrong, and they make these arguments and they try to justify everything. So there's people that make arguments and try to justify abortion and contraception and all these other things. And I want to talk about just really briefly about that. They don't believe in God, so they don't believe that we're made in God's image and likeness. So the first thing that they're doing a lot of times, a secular ethicist who's talking about right and wrong doesn't even believe that human beings are special in the first place. They'd probably rather spend money saving a whale or some other thing than they would on a human being. And so a lot of times they're coming from that background where they don't even believe that we're special in the first place, right? That's one thing to remember. They try to diminish then the dignity of human life. They think that, well, humanity is a disease on the planet, and we don't have anything, we're not special, and so we have to downplay the importance of human life because human beings we're so self-centered, and we dominate all the resources and we ruin the world. And so they try to downplay the importance of human life, which is crazy because we're the only thing made in the image and likeness of God. That does not give us a right to be arrogant. That does not give us a right to abuse anyone or the world. We're still called to be stewards of the earth and all those things, as Pope Francis has said recently in his encyclical. But we are special, and we have to believe that or everything falls apart. I mean, if you don't think that it's special to be a human person, that we don't have a special dignity, then you probably shouldn't be Catholic or Christian. Here's a couple of examples. There are a lot of them, and they'll give you, secular ethicists a lot of times will give you false or misleading questions and trying to get you to question your Christian faith, your Catholic faith. I had a lot of this in college, and most people, this is where you would encounter that, okay? It's really interesting. They'll say something like, and this is just an example, I just ran across this the other day. Someone threw this out at me, of course. If you are holding a Petri dish and a child and you have to drop one, which one would you drop? So they're trying to say, look, a Petri dish in one hand with a fertilized egg and embryo in it, right? You got a Petri dish. And then the other hand, you have a 2-year-old child, and you have to drop one. Which one would you drop? And they were saying, well, of course, you would drop the Petri dish. But they try to trap you in. Secular ethicists so often try to trap you in with these questions and make you then violate, oh my gosh, well, I got to drop one. Well, of course, I don't know. But this is just a Petri dish. I should maybe drop it. But I think it's a human being too. And it's a human life and it's sacred. But I got to drop one, right? The answer to this is, if someone is holding a gun to my head and saying you have to drop either the child, let the child die, or the embryo die, what I would say is this, and this is how you get out of these things. You say, you shoot me, but you're not going to get me to commit a sin. You have to kill. If someone puts a gun to my head and says you have to kill this child or kill this child, I would say no. I'm not going to kill either one. If you want to shoot me, then that's on you. Your sin is you're the one that's doing the sin. I will sleep perfectly fine and I will be ready to face my Lord. If you tell me to kill one of these two children, I won't kill either of them. You have to kill me. If you're the one putting the gun to my head, then kill me. That's the thing that they don't think this doesn't allow that. And they'll say, well, no, you have to choose. No, I don't. I don't have to choose one. If I think both people are alive, I don't have to do anything. You don't have to do anything you want. And so a lot of times just taking these questions and reframing them and putting them back on the person asking the question busts up what they're trying to get you to do, which is to, somehow say, well, gosh, I guess I do have to violate my Christian faith. I guess, blah, blah, blah. Okay? This was one that I got in college, and you hear this one a lot too, and it's kind of a similar thing. If you have they'll set up this imaginary scenario. If you have a crying baby, let's say that there's a bunch of Jews in a basement hiding out from the Nazis, and one woman has a crying baby, and the Nazis knock on the door. The Nazis knock on the door at the house, and so now all these Jews hear this, and the baby's crying. And if the scenario is, of course, like if you don't kill the baby, then you're all going to get found down in the basement, and the Nazis are going to come and take everyone away. So you should kill the baby. The answer to that, though, is of course it's not that I should kill the baby. It's that I should, if the Nazis come and they're going to find me, I'm not going to kill anyone. If they're the ones that are going to take me away and put us all in concentration camps, then that's on them. That's on the Nazis, right? But I'm not going to kill a baby in the hopes that I might somehow survive or not go to a concentration camp and somehow escape the Nazis. No. if I have a crying baby and the baby helps, it exposes me and I'm found by the Nazis, then I'm found by the Nazis. You know, Jesus said, what does it matter if we enter, if we violate what we believe, but we enter into eternal damnation? The important thing is that we make the right decision always and everywhere, no matter what, and that we don't violate what we know is right or wrong based on some imaginary scenario that we think might play out, right? These types of things, you're going to encounter them. You already have, and you'll continue to encounter them in college, these fake scenarios where people try to get you to violate what you believe, and they're actually just terrible questions, and you have to just back out and re-ask the question in a different way. What they do is they prey on those who haven't had logic, and they use their authority to force these things on young minds who aren't quite able to answer them always and everywhere. But just know, just trust that what's in your stomach, that you're not supposed to kill people, that abortion's wrong, all of these types of things, that you're okay in that, even though these people, these doctors or these, professors or teachers or whoever are trying to break down your morality and make you feel like you are a terrible person for being a Christian. Okay? So I just wanted to make that comment. Other attacks on early life. Okay, we talked about abortion. Another attack on early life would be embryonic stem cell research. Okay, now a lot of comments that I want to make about embryonic stem cell research. Embryonic stem cell research is this: again, we're talking about the embryo that's formed in the mother's womb when an egg is fertilized by a sperm and that starts to grow. Those cells in the embryo, they're kind of like blank slates, and they're really powerful cells because they will eventually become different. That some of them will become heart cells and brain cells and liver cells, but they're very powerful in those early stages because they're called stem cells. And so stem cells you can then, if you add the right chemicals, etc., you can take a stem cell and you can turn it into a heart cell, or you can turn it into a brain cell. Now, where is that important? If we can take stem cells and we can then turn them into heart cells and we can potentially repair people's hearts. Or if we could take a stem cell and then we take it and we turn it into a skin cell, or we turn it into a liver cell, we could do potentially, there's a lot of research being done about how we can repair livers, we can repair skin and help it with skin cancer and all these sorts of amazing technologies that are out there, right? The church is conducting what we call, and is financing, and lots of other people are conducting and financing, perfectly legitimate thing that is called adult stem cell research. There are ways to get stem cells besides killing an embryo. And that's very important. And the church and many other good people are doing that type of research right now in the world, right? They are operating on that, and there has been a lot of great advances in medical technology in this regard. So taking cells from adults and turning them back into stem cells so that they can use those to heal. Now, the problem is that some people are out there wanting to do embryonic stem cell research, which is taking an embryo that they've probably usually created in a lab, a sperm and an egg, fertilize the egg, but then so there's an embryo that's now growing, but then at some point early on in that process, they kill the embryo and harvest the stem cells from the embryo. So there's a child there that's forming in its early stages, and they take that, they bust that open, and they take all those stem cells out and do research on that. Now, we can create embryos, harvest their cells, and help cure things. That's the statement that people are talking about when they talk about embryonic stem cell research. People will say, yeah, it's not ideal, but look at all the good that it does. Yeah, it's not ideal that we kill these embryos, but hey, if it's going to help somebody else, if it's going to help Betty be cured from breast cancer or whatever, well, let's go ahead and sacrifice these embryos because it has a lot of good values and a lot of good things that we can do with it. Now, this is a huge Catholic teaching, and I've talked about it just a little bit ago, and I want to make sure that I emphasize it. In the Catholic Church, and I would say if you're going to remember 5 things from this year, this would be one of those things. Well, the first thing is that we're made in the image and likeness of God. The second thing that I would ask you to remember for this year is that the ends never justify the means. We believe that that's a bedrock teaching of our Catholic faith, and not everybody believes that. Even other Christians don't believe that. We believe that the ends never justify the means. You hear that sometimes. A lot of people will say that they do, that the means justify the ends. that the ends do justify the means. What we believe is that they do not. And what I mean by that, the ends are the results of an action. The results of an action, and the means are the way that we get there, the path that we travel to the results. So what some people say is, okay, look, if there's good results, then we can take a bad path, we can take a sinful path to get to the good results. So if Betty's going to be cured from cancer over here, even if that means killing someone, let's take that path to get to Betty being cured from cancer. So they'll say that the results justify the bad path, the sinful path that we took to get there. The Catholic Church says, and this is hugely important, this makes us very unique as Catholics, the results never justify the path. And that kind of gets back to these bad ethicist teachings, right? No. What we believe as Catholics is that no matter what happens down here, I can't take a bad path. I can't take a sinful path to get to those results. If I do, I'm sinning. What I have to do as a Catholic is not take bad paths. I can't imagine and think, well, maybe this will work out better in the end. Maybe there will be a good result at the end of this rainbow. Negative. Never. Ever. What I have, and that actually, it makes it very easy to be Catholic. It makes it very simple in a lot of ways sometimes as well. I simply have to look at, I don't have to think about, well, what impact is this going to have? Maybe 2 years from now there's going to be a good result here. And let's see, how will this scenario play out, et cetera, and imagine all these things. Half of them would, most of it never happens, or I have no control over, I have no idea what's going to happen tomorrow, let alone at the end of this rainbow. So for me as a Catholic, what I have to do is, what's the right path for me to take this morning? That's all I have to worry about, right? What am I supposed to be doing right now, this morning? And if somebody's presenting to me, hey, drop a child or kill an embryo, I can just say, well, actually both of those are wrong. I don't have to go down that path, right? Someone's saying, hey, you have to kill your baby so that you don't end up in a concentration camp. I say, nope, it's right in front of me. I never kill children. So I don't have to go down that path. I don't know, hey, maybe I will end up in a concentration camp, but that would never justify me killing a child now anyways. So I don't have to worry about that. I simply look at what's in front of me right now, and that helps me. That's what I have to worry about as a moral person, as a person making decisions, right? I don't have to worry about these kind of things. So, as Catholics, we believe very strongly and very importantly that the results, the ends, do not justify the means that we use to get there. It does not justify the means. Very important. Hopefully you write that down, okay? Now, a lot of people, as soon as you say, think about this, as soon as you say that the results justify sinful paths to get there, you will open the door for everything. People will say, well, I've got to kill my mom because when I kill my mom, there might be a good result 5 years from now. And you might be right. Right? I mean, like, at least in the flawed logic of, you could imagine something that would work out well if you do that. Well, I've got to do this now, and it'll have a good result for me at the end. That's all crazy. That's crazy talk, right? That's absolutely crazy. Look at the Nazis. The Nazis use that kind of thinking, right? Well, we got to kill some Jews, but we're going to get a lot of really good medical research. And they did. The Nazis got a lot of great medical progress. They made medical progress. How they do it? By experimenting on people and killing them. Would anybody say that we got a lot of great, and the results were, there was some medical progress made. We learned things about the human body because of all the Nazi experiments. But no one would say that, that makes the Nazi experiments okay, right? That's crazy. But that would be, if you say that the results can justify the means, that's exactly what the Nazis said. Well, we're going to learn a lot about the body. We're going to learn to make a lot of medical progress. So that's going to justify the path that I take to get there. That's insane. But that's what you open up. As soon as you say the results can justify the path that I take to get there, then it's all fair game. I can do whatever I want, and I can just say, well, I'm hoping that there will be a good result 20 years from now. Okay? Planned Parenthood. Again, we talked about them as well. You may have seen this shocking videos of how they were and have been continuing. As they commit abortions, they've actually been caught undercover many different times, many different places throughout the past few years, talking about how not only are they killing the child, they're actually harvesting they're harvesting baby parts to use for research. So they're harvesting livers, they're harvesting brains, they're harvesting hearts, harvesting baby parts, full bodies, all these types of things in order to do research on the children. What's the justification? The people say from Planned Parenthood, well, look, we're getting good medical research out of this. So yeah, maybe a baby has to die in the midst of all this, but hey, the baby wasn't wanted anyways. The mom was going to commit an abortion. When all we see really, if we look at this with, I think, a clear perspective from the Catholic perspective, is it's just evil stacked up upon evil, stacked up upon evil. We're committing abortion, we're killing the child. Now we have all these people who are talking very callously. Watch the videos that are out there. If you want to be an adult and you want to actually hear what's really going on in the world, go watch one of the videos about Planned Parenthood selling baby parts. Okay? I'm not going to watch it, I'm not going to put it on here, but I challenge you to do that. It's unbelievable. You never hear it on the news because the news is protecting, a lot of the mainstream media is protecting these sorts of things and keeping this all in place. But this is really important from John Paul II along these lines. No objective, no result, no end, even though noble in itself, such as a foreseeable advantage to science, to other human beings, or to society, can in any way justify experimentation on living human embryos or fetuses, whether viable or not, either inside or outside the mother's womb. There is to be none of that. And that's John Paul II, again reiterating the fact that the results can never justify the means. I can't operate on a baby. I can't destroy an embryo. I can't cut off a child's head in the womb. I can't take any of that. None of that. That's all bad paths. So don't tell me about what you think might come out of it that's good or bad. I don't care. We shouldn't care. It doesn't matter. We can't predict the future. We don't know what's going to happen. As a Catholic, what we do is we don't make bad decisions in the path that's laying right in front of me. Okay? So that actually, again, very freeing. Another attack on early life, in vitro fertilization. This is the process where a husband and a wife are trying to conceive a child but cannot. And that's a very difficult situation to be in. And as a priest, I've walked with lots of couples that are in this. This is a very hard thing. You can imagine if you've been getting married, you've been getting excited, you want to have a child, but you're not able to conceive for whatever reason. There may be infertility involved on the part of the woman or the man or both. And that's a really difficult situation. I know that firsthand in talking with people, having friends that are struggling and battling that. But in vitro fertilization then is proposed as a way to help a couple in that situation. In vitro fertilization, what it is it basically takes eggs from the woman and fertilizes it with sperm from the man after the man masturbates, produces sperm. And in a laboratory setting, the sperm and the eggs are fertilized by the sperm, and there are usually embryos, maybe 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 embryos, whatever it might be, that are created, lots of embryos. That embryo is then planted back into the woman because conception couldn't happen, but a lot of times the embryo is planted back into the woman. Sometimes it's even implanted in another woman. So it might be, Beth and Steve are trying to conceive. They take an embryo or an egg from Beth, and they take the sperm from Steve, fertilize it. So first of all, we have the problem with Steve being required to masturbate and commit that sin. But then when that in vitro fertilization is done, the egg from the woman, Beth, and Steve, when that happens, when that embryo is, sometimes it's actually then placed in another woman, Karen, or someone like that, who then carries the child and gives birth to the child, even though the child belongs to Beth and Steve. And so we have a lot of violations going on of the different commandments when we talk about in vitro fertilization. One of the things is it violates the 6th commandment, which we'll talk about next class, but it also violates the 5th commandment because multiple embryos are created in that process. So you have lots of eggs and sperm that are fertilizing those eggs, and they look through the embryos that are fertilized and they decide which ones they want to implant, which ones don't have Down syndrome, which ones have the best chance to live, which ones, it's almost getting to the point where you can have designer babies is what it's called, where you look at the genetic traits in these embryos and decide, I think I want to have that embryo in become my child, or I want, etc. And it's just really, it's extremely expensive, it's medically dangerous, and in fact the Catholic Church has a lot of great ways to help fertilize couples that actually have a much higher rate of success and are in line with church teaching. Okay, it's called Naprotechnology. We had a talk by Dr. Bajuyo, which I'll also send out to you. You can watch that. I sent out a quick little 15-minute highlight reel of that, talking about what the church says to people who are trying to conceive of a child in this particular situation. So the church is against in vitro fertilization as it's done in the world, where people are, when we're talking about this whole process of taking the egg out of the woman and so forth. There's a lot of ways to do it to help couples who are struggling with fertility. There's a lot of ways to help them that, again, are in line and in rhythm with the Catholic Church. And so hopefully that talk that I sent you from Dr. Bajuyo will help you out a lot as well. Okay, attacks at the end of life. So we talked about the attacks at the beginning of life. There's also a lot of violations of the fifth commandment that happen at the end of one's life. One of them would be euthanasia. Okay, this is a term where we talk about deciding that someone needs to die because of the quality of life. So it is a putting to death of someone, usually when they're not able to stand up and to speak for themselves. It's a group of people, maybe it's a group of doctors, it's a group of family and doctors, whatever it might be, that says, Dave, who is unconscious and hasn't, whatever, it's time for Dave to die. What the church says is that you don't have to stay, the church does not say that you have to stay alive in every situation, always and everywhere. The church says that you can die, you can choose to die naturally. What the church says is that you have to receive ordinary care. You can't refuse to be cared for in an ordinary way. So I have to be fed, I have to be given food and water. I can't just say, you know what, I don't want food anymore, because I want to die, or I don't want water anymore because I want to die. I have to receive those types of things that are ordinary care for me. But what I don't have to take is what's called extraordinary care. So if I'm on life support, I can choose, if I've discerned this through prayer, I can choose to have myself taken off life support, or I can even choose that for a family member if it looks like that they're unconscious, they were in a car wreck, they're on life support, where a machine is literally breathing for them and keeping them alive. In those situations, it is possible, after lots of prayer and discernment, which obviously is going to take place, no one's going to do that on a whim. It is possible to decide to remove life support. Either I can do that for myself, or even other family members can decide, it looks like he's never going to recover, he's never going to come out of this. There's a difference, though, between intentionally giving someone a drug and killing them and letting someone die because of natural causes. And so that's what the church says. We can do that, but I can't take some kind of pill. I can't give someone something that will actually kill them. Assisted suicide is the same thing, although assisted suicide is usually when the person is conscious themselves, they're awake and alert. They ask for someone to help pull the plug or give them something because they just feel like they want to die. They're in a lot of pain or whatever it might be. The church says that that's always and everywhere wrong and a violation of the fifth commandment too. Care, I worked in the hospitals as a chaplain and so on and so forth, so I've seen a lot of these situations play out. I watched a person whose family decided that they were going to not feed him anymore because he was unconscious, and he starved to death over the course of 50 days. I've seen assisted suicide play out. I saw a family struggling with that. I saw a woman struggling with that. The thing to know is that we can have almost all of our pain relieved through medicine, and so when we are at our end, we can, through medicine, help in our own country particularly. We can be guided through that process in a way in which we don't experience pain. We can be given medicine that helps us. So assisted suicide is never an option for us as Catholics. And then we have, of course, suicide itself. A lot of times there's a lot of confusion about suicide. Does a person automatically die, or does a person automatically go to hell if they have committed the sin of suicide? Catechism says something very beautiful about that. It says, by ways known to Him alone, God can provide the opportunity for salutary repentance. The Church prays for persons who have taken their own lives. So God can work however God wants to work, and we don't know exactly what God will do and how God does it at the end of time. He might come to us and give us another chance to repent. We don't know. But what we do know is that God is present in His sacraments. And so if we die in a state of grace, then we're definitely okay. What God does with people who die in these serious situations, and again, we don't know what mental illnesses and battles their person's fighting. We don't judge those things. That's why Jesus says, we don't judge, because we don't know everything that's going on. We don't know all the infinite variables that feed into any decision that a person makes. Even somebody that gets an abortion, right? We know that the abortion is wrong, but we don't judge the person, and we don't walk up to the person and say, "Oh, you got an abortion, you're going to hell, or you're an evil person." We don't worry about that. We talk about the sins that are there. These are all types of sins, and we talk about them when we talk about how they're wrong and they're bad and they harm us in a very serious way. But we don't then have to also worry about judging individual people because of these things. We talk about the sins, not the sinners. We love the sinners, the people we're all sinners, right? So we love the people who sin, all of us, but we still continue to preach against the sins themselves. There's a difference. And sometimes you get accused, if you talk about the sins, people say, "Oh, you're such a hater. Oh, you're judging people." No, I'm not judging people. We're talking about the things that are wrong, and we're passing that on to people. A couple of questions then to answer. What are the attacks on life at the beginning of life? And then what are the attacks on life at the end of life? Question 3. Okay, so I went through those. What are some of those attacks at the beginning? What are some of those attacks at the end? Really quickly, I want to talk at the end here, because there's a lot packed into this fifth commandment, right? Just war. When I taught these classes at high school, I would teach, each of these. This was maybe like 7 or 8 hours, all these classes. But anyways, we're trying to condense them as quick as possible. Okay, so just war. The Catholic Church is, one of the cool things about the Catholic Church is we have this theory called just war theory. And it's one of those places where most of the world turns to the Catholic Church for advice and wants to know what we believe as Catholics on particular situations and asks for our feedback. We have come up with this over time as a church. And you'll see them described in different terms and titles, but there's basically these 5 criteria that we talk about what is required in order for a war to be just. We don't say that every war is wrong always and everywhere, that there are times where we can go to war and war is justified. So the 5 things that all have to be met. First of all, the military action must be self-defense. So I have to be defending someone, either myself or someone who's weak and vulnerable. I have to be doing some kind of self-defense in order for that to be a just war. I also have to make sure that the military action is a last resort. Have we tried everything else? Have we tried diplomacy? Have we tried talking? Have we tried going to other nations and saying, "Hey, can you help us talk to these guys, this country? Can we do is there economic sanctions that we can put on them? Is there other things that we can do to try and make this happen?" So we just make sure that that it's a last resort. If it isn't a last resort, then it wasn't a just war because we didn't try everything else first. We also have to make sure there's a probability of success. I can't go fight a war with some country if I know I'm not going to win. Okay, the church condemns always and everywhere in every form terrorism, which is that idea that I know I can't tackle that country or this situation or that community or that nation, but what I am going to do, I know I can't succeed in a war, but what I am going to do is declare war in a small way and do some sort of act of violence. I have to have a probability of success. I can't go to war knowing that I'm just going to cause a bunch of damage and then we're all going to, that I don't really have a chance to win this. The 4th thing about the just war theory, the military action also has to be proportional to the threat. I can't, if somebody does something to me, I can't just go in and wipe out their civilization, or I can't respond if somebody does something small to me. I have to respond in a way that's equivalent to that, not just, infinitely, an infinitely greater response, because then all you have is this constant back and forth where it just keeps ratcheting up. So it has to be proportional to the threat that's there. I can't just, again, I can't just go, bomb everything in a country. If something happens to our country, we have the ability in just war, but it has to be proportional to the threat. I can't just do whatever I want. And then finally, I have to make sure that non-combatants are not targeted. That's not allowed. I can never target, as a country, I can't ever target non-combatants. I can't, I have to make sure that it's between people who are soldiers and so forth. And some people will use that against us. They'll use just war. They know that we aren't going to target non-combatants. We're not going to target civilians if we're in a just war as a Christian people. And so they will use that to their advantage. The church is also, again, as I said, condemns terrorism every way, in every opportunity, in every sense of the word. Terrorism is condemned. It's in the Catechism. You can find it there if you're curious on that. Let's see. The fourth question, what are the characteristics of a just war that were just on the previous screen? What are the characteristics, the 5 characteristics of a just war? Finally, the last thing here today, fifth commandment, respecting the body, the dignity that I have, and treating other people's bodies and keeping them and their life in a certain way. It's a way that we look at life. I don't murder other people. I don't destroy bodies. I don't cause death. The other thing is that the final thing that the church talks about in this regard is also just kind of how we respect our own bodies. It talks about that with regard to the fifth commandment and some sins of particular note in that regard. One of them would be gluttony. Just eating as much food as I want, eating all the time, eating to drown out my emotions or my sorrow or my loneliness or whatever it might be. A lot of people, we struggle, particularly in this country, because food is so prevalent and available. We really struggle with the sin of gluttony. And it harms me. I can gain weight and become obese and become unhealthy. And because of that, then I'm harming my body. In a sense, I'm murdering my own self, my own body. I'm destroying it, right? Mutilation or cutting myself, taking my body, which God has made in His own image and likeness, cutting myself and mutilating myself, marring that gift, scarring that gift that God has given to me. An obsession with physical beauty or perfectionism. That can also be a way in which we disrespect the body that God's given to us, where we obsess over it. We can become overly focused on it in a sense that we think that we somehow, are in control of it. And that it's not beautiful in and of itself, that I'm not beautiful in by myself, but that I need, this perfectionism and this all of this obsession over physical beauty. There's nothing wrong with makeup or, combing my hair or, getting my hair cut or looking nice or any of those things. But is there an obsession? And once it becomes an obsession, then that's when it becomes a problem. Some people choose to be sterilized. One of the great gifts that God gives us is our fertility, our ability to have children, our ability to pass on that gift of human dignity to another soul, to give birth. And so to forfeit that right, to give that right up through this process of sterilization, where either I have my tubes tied or I have a vasectomy if I'm a man, and etc., that forces me, that takes away my ability to conceive and to participate in conceiving children. That's obviously just a huge violation of the dignity that God's given to us as human beings and harms my body in a particular way. And of course, substance abuse, alcohol, drugs, all those kinds of things where I'm abusing them. There is a way to enjoy alcohol in a responsible way. There's never a way to enjoy drugs in a responsible way, and we can talk a little bit more about that. But basically, the thought is that even using recreational drug use destroys my body in a way that it's not reversible. I talk with a lot of kids, high school kids. You can tell when a kid's on weed, when a kid's doing other drugs, even harder drugs than that. It changes them psychologically, it changes their brain patterns, etc., forever. And while there is a sense in which alcohol and caffeine also do kind of harm my body in particular ways, it's not in a way in which it's anything serious. Like, it doesn't harm my mind, my soul. You talk to people, even the alcoholic people, who have really struggled obviously with that for a long time, they're still the same person. It doesn't affect their mind and their soul as much. And so, but of course, still abusing alcohol is still a problem. I'm not saying that. But I am saying that there is a difference between that. And so, it's not that some people will say, well, marijuana and beer, it's all the same. No, it's not. Beer and marijuana are very different things. Beer and wine and heroin are very different things. So with alcohol, I need to make sure first of all, if I'm under 21, I'm not using them because I have to, as a good Catholic, St. Paul says we follow the laws of our land. Okay? But also, even if I'm older than 21, I do need to make sure that I'm not abusing that. I mean, then that can become a thing where I am still harming my body in a very real way and destroying my liver and my brain cells and that kind of thing. But also not abusing other drugs as well. That is a violation of the fifth commandment as well. So, the final question, there's a beautiful story at the end of your chapter in your book about a man by the name of Jacques Fesch. And I just want you to read that story. It's an amazingly powerful story. I'd never heard it before, but I just want you to tell me just a little bit about his life, because I think, again, it's a very powerful one. I know we took a little bit of extra time today, but there's a lot of stuff here with abortion and euthanasia and vitro fertilization, just war. I mean, again, this would take about 10 hours when I was teaching it in high school. So if you have any questions or anything, let me know. Otherwise, know that I'm praying for you, and have a great week, and we'll see you next week.